Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So if you haven't heard, recently, as of the making of this video in October 2024, Game Freak suffered a pretty significant data breach, and as such, a bunch of info that was previously kept under wraps has been leaking like crazy. And amongst the early Pokemon designs, the sus lore, and beta builds of past Pokemon games that were unearthed, there was actually also a Mario game that, until now, never saw the light of day to the public that was actually found in the source code for Pokemon Black and White. And interestingly, albeit a very small game, it also has a bit of unused content as well, so consider this a little mini lost bits of sorts too. Anyways, here we have the Mario game that was scrapped titled Yossy Egg. And although you do technically play as Mario in this game, I guess it could be a bit unfair to call it a Mario game, since this appears to actually be a remake of the 1991 puzzle game released on the NES and Game Boy titled just Yoshi, or Mario and Yoshi in PAL regions. Now, this certainly isn't the most popular puzzle game out there, not even on the NES, so I wouldn't blame those who didn't recognize it right away, but this is actually one of the NES games I played growing up, so it holds a slightly more special place for me. The game is pretty simple. You just move Mario around on the bottom of the play area, and flip and switch around columns of enemies to match them up to eliminate them before the columns get too high. And Yoshi here will indicate how many eggs were brought together, which spawn in some baby Yoshis. And of course, seemingly being a remake, the game works the same here, though with updated visuals and some different enemies that weren't seen in the original. The original version of the game only ever had Goombas, Bloopers, Boos, as well as Piranha Plants. And it appears like this remake of the game would have taken the player through various locales, each which would presumably have its own set of enemies. Now, unfortunately, after getting through this janky main menu screen, all that's left intact in this build of the game is this underwater shipwreck area, where in addition to the bloopers which were seen in the original game and the Cheep Cheeps here, we also have some more obscure or potentially never before seen Mario enemies, including a yellow jellyfish which could be an updated look for the Gelectro enemies first seen in Super Mario Bros. 3, as well as these red seahorse fellas, which although unconfirmed, I guess could be the Urarin enemies only ever seen in Super Mario Land. Yeah, talk about an obscure pick. And as you can see in the gameplay here, only one half of the screen looks like it's being used, and that's 'cause it is. Now, a two-player versus mode did exist in the original game where two players would duke it out against each other, with player 1 playing as Mario and player 2 taking command of Luigi. And in this remake, this is oddly the only way to normally play this game, and although it obviously looks like the groundwork for a versus mode was being implemented, it never ended up getting finished, at least not whenever this build was made. So we're just left here awkwardly playing on half of a screen. And being found in the source code of a DS game and still functional on a DS, if you were curious, the bottom screen for this build doesn't contain anything, so really, we're only playing on like a quarter of the total usable screen space here. And real quick, if you're enjoying my content, get some extra perks and support the channel by becoming a channel member today. Click or tap the join button below for some more info. Anyways, while we're on the topic of the two-player mode, now's a good time to segue into the few bits of content that go unused in this game. The first of which is actually Mr. Player 2 himself. Yep, despite the versus mode not being functional, a full array of sprites for Luigi is actually left over in the game. Now, there aren't many actions that the characters do in this game, but we got sprites for Luigi turning, different animations of Luigi flipping the columns both facing towards and away from the player, as well as a pair of animations for Luigi seemingly either winning or losing a versus match. And Green Mario isn't the only bit of unused content left over, as next we also have these sprites which appear to be for a woodland area that isn't playable in this build. Now, at first glance, the top and bottom of this image may look identical, but upon closer inspection, we can see that one of the middle tree trunks here has spots while the other doesn't, and then the trees in the background are also quite a bit darker in the top version here. Furthermore, the aspect ratio of the images is different, with the bottom one being a bit taller. My immediate thought was, oh, maybe this is for the DS top and bottom screen respectively, but no, both of the DS's screens are actually the same size, so this doesn't seem to be the case. In any case though, it's cool to see at least one more biome in which this game would have taken the player. Then after this, we have this here graphic featuring two DS's, likely for multiplayer functionality. And then, although the color palette is probably wrong here, there's also a sprite sheet for Yoshi growing all the way from its baby stages. Now this is kind of similar to what is seen when combining egg halves in the original game, though here the Yoshi looks like it would have ended up growing much bigger. And although baby Yoshis are still seen in this game when combining the egg halves, they don't seem to grow any larger than in the original. And then lastly, for the unused content left over in this game is also a scrapped music track. Here it is in full. With so little of this game playable in this state, it's not 100% clear where this track would have been used. And although to me it sounds like more of a western or farm themed track, its file name actually refers to it as Mori, which translates from Japanese to forest. So perhaps it was in fact meant to be associated with this forest area. Either way, I think it's honestly pretty catchy. Now, what exactly was this remake supposed to be, and why was it found in the Pokemon Black and White source code? Well, Game Freak actually did develop the original Yoshi game, and although it's unknown for certain and probably won't ever be confirmed unless it gets explained in another leak someday, which at this rate isn't that unlikely, two main theories I've seen are that Game Freak was simply using this as a test for the engine that was used to develop Pokemon Black and White, or that this might have actually been planned to release on the Nintendo DS. Being such a basic game for mid-2000s standards, it's thought that it may have been too small to have been a standalone physical title, and may have just been planned to be a DSiWare title or something. And furthermore, seen on the title screen is a copyright date of 1995, and with the title screen itself also appearing to be appropriate for the era, this definitely seems to point to this being a remake of the game that was originally intended for the Super Nintendo, with some speculation that it may have even been a game planned for the Satellaview service in Japan, as that service featured a bunch of other NES games with updated graphics for the Super Famicom. I made a full video on the Satellaview service a while ago if you're interested in learning some more about it. Then another thing that's interesting on this main menu is that it lists Ape Inc., which actually eventually became Creatures Inc. So based on that, this build must have been made sometime before November 8th, 1995. But whether it was actually intended to be sold on the DS platform, or the developers just dusted off a scrapped Super Nintendo remake in 2007 as a way to test the new Pokemon engine at the time, it's honestly super cool that this was unearthed, and we got to see a bit of Nintendo and Game Freak history, that if it weren't for the leaks, we probably wouldn't have ever known about this. Now, I've had quite a few people reach out to me regarding a bunch of the other Pokemon leaks and asking if I'll be covering them, and yeah, probably eventually, but there's just so much of it that got dumped recently, so I probably won't get around to covering most of the stuff until I get to covering each of the respective games. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, check out some of my other videos, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in a bit.